So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that send. It's gonna get you, son, in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy, another special bonus Boomerang edition. Thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube. Before we get any further, be sure to like and subscribe. I know everyone says that, but it is really helpful. And now I'm going to talk about why we're sitting here having drinks with a casket in the background. I'm here with Andrew and Phil of Til Death Speakeasy in Kansas City, Missouri. Folks, would you care to tell us about what's upstairs before we get to what's going on right here?
I'll take that one. We're below an active, live, every day in business funeral home.
And so this is just kind of standard for every funeral home, right? There's usually a bar in the basement.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely a bar, a speakeasy, every funeral home. No, this is unique to us.
This was your idea, but the seed kind of came from the folks that owned the business before you took over. Isn't that right?
Yeah. When I was 24, the folks that owned it before us, they were in their late 70s. We did that transfer, and it was pretty crazy. Once they left, they were Southern Baptist. The big Baptist church was across the street. And these old guys would pull me aside and ask me where the bar was. And this went on for a decade. And I finally got brave enough after we kind of excavated and got comfortable with the building. I realized there's something going on down here. I didn't really know what it was. So I got brave and asked a guy one day, what do you mean by a bar? And he told me that they used to tell their wives that they were going to the church for men's meetings, and that the classrooms were all full. And we just sneak over to Gilbert's place, the funeral home across the street. And we found out that they were actually not really men's meetings. They were a little drinking club. And for a couple of decades,
that's a men's meeting. That sounds like a men's meeting right there.
So back in the 60s and 70s, when they couldn't drink out in a restaurant or at a bar, and probably didn't have a bottle at home, maybe, I don't know, it was hidden, but they were having full on, they had a good time down here. And so what you see behind you is actually the space that they used to entertain folks. Now the casket wasn't here. He had a little bar. Casket's kind of our creation, but it's in the basement of my funeral home.
I always wonder when I hear this story, when those people would come up and ask you that, was there a part of you that's like, is this a sting? Are you a cop?
Yeah,
like,
no,
what's going
I mean,
on?
we weren't from that tribe. We were not Southern Baptist, my wife and I. So I didn't know if they were trying to trip up these young folks that took over or they had some dirt, and I didn't want to, I didn't want to expose the folks before in our profession. This, transfer down from family to family is such a sacred kind of thing anyway. And I just thought it's not my story to tell. And so eventually I thought, I'm just too curious about it. And we had exposed kind of what we see behind us. And, that was kind of the impetus of going, what was this thing?
Well, I want to walk through that process too, because again, the idea of a speakeasy in the basement of a funeral home is not the sort of thing that you see every day. But I do have to ask, after you had made all of the changes to make sure everything, got to where it is today, maybe, you've said you've added and built on the concept as time has gone by, but were you just dying for the first person to come up and ask so you could be like, yes, there is the bar in the basement. Do you want to see it?
Right.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, there's a fine line between, do I want people to know it's there? Does it, it's, you don't know where people are when they come into a funeral home, family, friend, guest, you don't want to be cavalier. As a funeral director, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the family that you're serving and the empathy that you have for them in the moment that you're serving them. And to bring my story into it, even though they've asked, it feels a little bit awkward. I've learned that as our this kind of thing is leaked out and people have found out about this and follow us on Instagram and ask questions, we do play with it a little bit. And I mean, we've famously had a couple of people say, gosh, I could use a drink as a speakeasy open, and like, no. And I mean, there'll be someday we might come down and the brother-in-laws and the sons-in-laws and all the guys that are trying to look at a way to get out of the chapel may come down here and we might throw some spirits at them. But in the meantime, there is a dance of what's appropriate and what's not.
Does it feel like you have to wear two completely different hats for both of these businesses?
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, I do. And that's a great question, because I'm always, again, like the previous question, I'm worried about making that person's time with us about me. Yet people are interested, and certainly people in funerals and around death are much more celebratory now. It's not a dirge, and it's not black clothes. It's, many times our funerals are, everybody's wearing Chiefs gear or a funny hat, or, someone's brought in, a lady collected small miniature pigs, and they've got her pig collection. They're giving away her little pigs, and there's stories, and, people are much brighter, and they've lived a long life, and we're now celebrating it. So humor and this kind of kitsch works, but that dance is interesting. So to answer your question, I think it's probably a me thing more than it is my families I serve. They're probably much more comfortable with me being a little bit of a character more than I was. But because when I started 31 years ago, you were taught dark suit, stand in the corner, step away. It's not about you. And now we are part of the show. We are part of the celebration. We are part of creating the experience for those people that lost somebody.
Yeah, we're going down the road, which is really interesting because you're sitting with a guy who has kind of transformed the funeral industry outside of the speakeasy. This is just our little playground and toy that we have here, but you're talking to the guy who's like, from a marketing standpoint and a positioning standpoint in his industry, is like the King Dean of like having changed the overall perception of funeral homes and death and things of that nature. So you've hit on a really, that's why both of our families have always had like this really strong hospitality kind of like vibe to us. We were always hosting parties at our houses and things, wine tastings, whatever. And that's all your business is a outgrowth of hospitality.
Absolutely.
And this is just our way of delivering hospitality as well to our guests that come in here. But we just do it for charity. The outgrowth of that's all we really want to do. When you host somebody for a funeral and a family, you're being very hospitable to them, and you're delivering on things that you've learned over the years from Disney and so forth.
Yeah.
And we translate that then down here into how we execute here in the speakeasy and what we do for charity.
I don't know if you remember this, but when your father-in-law passed away, we were on vacation, which was crazy. Our families were on vacation, just the two couples, and his father-in-law passed away while we were on vacation. So Here I am with our besties making arrangements with his wife in the living room of a Marriott suite. They took off, a couple of days ahead. We came back, but his brother-in-law, who has been a guest at our events many, many times, in the hallway, he was the first to say, "Man, I wish the speakeasy was open tonight. I could really use a drink." And it was his dad's funeral upstairs, and he wasn't making fun of this, and he wasn't taking away from the celebration for his dad. He saw this as escape from that place,
Totally. And this is something that we talk about a lot on the show when we get into sort of one of our more maudlin veins. I feel oftentimes like I'm sort of the tiebreaker between like Sunshine Damon and Stormcloud Souther on the show. So when
said it, not us.
So when I'm in one of my more introspective moods, I feel like all of our listeners are like, oh, it's going to be a sad one. Buckle up, people. But I do think that alcohol, and first of all, we've talked about this on the show, I think if alcohol were discovered today, it would be illegal tomorrow. Like the health side effects of it and the way that it affects people, like considering some of the much more mundane drugs that we make illegal in this country, I don't see this as a new discovery being something that the America that I know would take very well to.
Right.
That being said, it consistently proves fairly impossible to prohibition out of society because it is such a useful tool, not only for celebratory moments, but for sad moments.
Moments. Yeah. It's not just a drug for courage at a bar to meet somebody. It really is a place to escape as well. I mean, the craziest, we have had to invest in special sprays that are made specifically for our profession to take away the smell of cannabis. Everybody comes to our services now, they've pre-partied, and many times our services, the weed is the cannabis smell is so predominant, and it's not any particular socioeconomic class, but it is like, I'm going to my dad's funeral. Like, I'm going to take a hit in the car before I come in. And they come in, it's like, wow. And our whole chapel. So we have this stuff called Weed Be Gone, and we spray it. It's a spray that's kind of like takes away that cannabis smell, but that's a real thing. Before that, it was a Sunday afternoon visitation at 6 o'clock, and everybody came in, had beer breath. And, you know, you're going to have when we have a Hispanic family, you know, they'll pull me aside and say, hey, can we set up a little area, put some tequilas out? Absolutely. So you clean up, there'll be 4 or 5 bottles of tequila, some shot glasses. So we've been partying here long before Til Death the Speakeasy, pre-partying, partying. And, you know, when we walk the parking lot the next day, it's not 7-Up we're picking up usually.
Also, you heard it here first, folks. The Crematorium, a speakeasy dispensary, coming soon, 2026.
Yeah, Heartland Hash.
So that's interesting. I mean, I think the thing that makes your business and this whole concept so interesting and makes every single person I've told about it go, what? That's awesome. Is that the concept of funeral home and speakeasy bar feel so removed from one another in our cultural imaginations. You think you go to one place to be sad and solemn and respectful, and you go to the other place to be the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
But it almost sounds like, and as you pointed out, they're both hospitality. It almost sounds like maybe this wasn't as much of a leap for you to build this out as I think this sort of casual observer might think it was.
Knowing that there was something here was really intriguing to me, especially. And as you mentioned, like, you tell that story to people out on the street today, and they're like, wow, where do I get an invite to that? Right. And so it does go kind of hand in hand with one another, that people want to escape, right? I mean, whether it's death, you know, and celebrating someone, they're trying to escape those feelings. And they're also trying to escape when they come down here. We have no windows that look outside or anything. It's very sensory deprivation here. And so that's what we're helping people do, is we're helping people escape and enjoy their time in both places.
I knew we'd have a moment where one of our guests was one of our families. And that happened in May at one of our events. A guy pulled me aside and said, you handle my mom and my sister. And you did great services. And when I got the address of this, I had no idea. And I went, well, I loved them for what they did before. I trusted it. And he goes, it was really good. And I said, did we really cross? Was there a feeling where you thought we made light of what happens in both places? He said, absolutely not. You kept that very respectful. And it made me really think about it. It was a shift for me thinking, you know, most people are already arrived in a place of a better sense of humor than I have in a worry about the reverence of it, because I never really ever wanted to grow into being irreverent of what I do for a profession. In my passion for bartending and for cocktails and for this experience here, I always thought was separate, but they're actually not. They really are part of the same world. And it's been some of our guests that really have pulled that together. Some of our guests have literally come back and prearranged their cremations and funerals with us. They've called weeks later and said, I want to prepay for my funeral at your funeral home. And they were not going to be using me before as a funeral customer.
I wouldn't have imagined that this would be an industry where there's a lot of repeat business,
right.
But
yeah, but it actually is all repeat business. The funeral profession is built all on repeat business. It's you went where your grandpa went, where your family went. You usually go back to the funeral home that your family went. So the repeat is 7 years, but it's all repeat business. There are very few disloyal customers in the funeral and cremation space.
Well, and that kind of brings us back to another way in which it's like this profession that y'all have gotten into. And I want to drill in on something that you said about, you know, you didn't want to feel like you were making light of the other side of your business by doing this. And you could have gone with, you know, the same poured, polished concrete bar top that 95% of new bars have these days. You went a slightly different route with that. So clearly you've sort of leaned into the concept. So I want to talk a little bit about building this space out, because it feels, you know, this feels so intentional and so lived in that it clearly didn't come together overnight. So talk to me about the actual process of building it out, and then talk to me about kind of finding your vibe, your zeitgeist, the feel of this place that you kind of grew into as you built it out.
I have to credit Phil because we're great partners in that we constantly push each other. If one of us gets a little afraid, the other pushes the other one through it. So I love the idea. The whole idea really was about the death of prohibition. It was actually started as a repeal
like
party.
Celebratory thing.
Yeah.
That's how we think about our bar.
Yeah.
Like, we're post-prohibition. It's time to celebrate.
Yeah. Our very first event 8 years ago was December 5th. And the idea was when people came in, it was still prohibition. And when they left, prohibition ended. So we took them through kind of a pageant where at the end we toasted to the end. We announced in the middle of service that prohibition had ended. That was our whole idea of what this was going to be. We just happened to have this, but I was very apologetic about this. It feels like we have to lean into Til Death, the death of prohibition and death. This isn't the basement of a funeral home. And he's like, no, people are ready for it. And so really Phil pushed on and our cocktail smoker is actually an urn. And as we built the bar back, it was really about, we showcase our local distilleries when we do our events, and make sure we highlight their bottles and that type of thing. So we only use the people that sponsor our events in our menus, but it's really about creating this kind of idea. There's a book up on the top shelf of funeral records. There's actually records from the 1960s alphabetically of people that have passed away. And there's an urn, and there are photographs and pictures of our ancestors on the bar back. My father-in-law, who's an undertaker, as a child, and our flag, which we dedicate, all of our money goes to veterans, and that started with honoring veterans at their time of loss and in those military honor services. But it's been the push and pull between the two of us that really pushed into this, deeper into the kind of the funeral culture, because I was squeamish about it.
It was it was at a time where speakeasy culture, cocktail culture was spreading in Kansas City, and we were just trying to, I always thought about it as like, this is such a unique venue down here, right? I mean, who would have ever thought to come to a funeral home and go to a speakeasy down there, that we ought to just like build it out and just like, this is who we are,
right?
And we're not a paid bar. We're a charity bar strictly, but we ought to just lean into this as a way for people to escape. Going back again to hospitality and escapism here.
You mentioned kind of the greater sort of vibe of Kansas City, and one of the fun things about doing these on-site podcasts, actually getting to go and like record these in people's houses, in their bars, in their distilleries, in their speakeasies below funeral homes, what have you, just to throw out some random examples. Yeah. One of the fun things about it is getting to ask, so how does this fit into the overall concept of Kansas City? What the vibe, as you mentioned, this cocktail consciousness that kind of came online, it sounds like maybe 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, tell me a little bit about
that, honestly. Right. I mean, it's very collegial here in Kansas City. I mean, there are the OGs, Ryan Mabey, Manifesto. He was the OG. We used to sit in his bar and pepper people with questions all the time. Jill Coxon's been around, Jay Saunders, all of these people, Brian Ari now at Fern Bar, Levi and Caleb Roy have their own concept that is just blowing up. I mean, it's everybody works with each other or have worked with each other, and it's very collegial. And for us, for two old dudes who would go into a bar, and Mike Strom,
our sensei,
he's our cocktail sensei. We would sit at his bar. We would get there. We would walk in the back door instead of the front door at 5:00 on a Friday night, every Friday night, and we would take the two corner seats at the bar, because that was where we could talk to him, and he would show us stuff, and he would show us techniques and things, and all of these people contributed to us learning a little bit about it and just being geeked out about the culture, and new ingredients were coming in at the time, and just the personalities and people, and we just wanted to honor them and what we were doing down here by, throwing a party and taking what they had taught us over the years and having other people experience it too.
I remember there was an event that was going on. We missed the window. It had ended about the time that Phil and I would have been brave enough to maybe even like wander into it. It was called Paris of the Plains, which was Kansas City's version of Portland Cocktail Week, or it was the mini tails here. And Ryan maybe at Rieger was a big part of that. And I didn't know what Paris of the Plains was. So we talk about Kansas City all the time as the city of fountains, second most fountains in the world behind Paris or Italy or whatever. No one really knows. It's all a myth, but we have fountains everywhere, and we're very proud of it. But I never really knew what Paris of the Plains was until we got into the prohibition side of Til Death. As part, half of our story is funeral home, the other half is repeal, the end of prohibition. So during prohibition never hit Kansas City. There was not a single felony arrest in Kansas City. So all the bars remained open. Boss Tom Pendergast was such an incredible crime boss, and so good at the mafioso, and had such good enforcement that none of the bars were raided. That means all the bartenders came to Kansas City. All the jazz musicians came to Kansas City. That's why we have the American Jazz Museum here. The bars never closed, and there was someone famously said, if you ever want to go find sin, you want to go to the Paris of the Plains, which is Kansas City. And so Boss Tom Pendergast really invented the crime syndicate that was copied in Chicago and in New York and eventually in Las Vegas. He was the guy that really created buying off the politicians and making sure it wasn't about killing people and muscling that way. It was about owning everybody in a political position to make sure that sin was never, ever looked at. And so the Kansas City craft cocktail culture somehow still embodies this rebellion sense of cocktails. So if we get a new place, it almost is not a copy of another place. They'll find they're just incredibly good at finding a new category and finding that category and taking that kind of category. And once they do it well, everybody else leaves them alone. So it's really special that we don't have every place we get to go and spend time has just a little bit of a different spin. We don't have to compare places. So it's really unique. And I think it comes from that. I think it comes from that rebellion place of Paris of the Plains.
Well, let me hit you with a new idea. And this is me as an outsider. So maybe I have perspective or maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know. You tell me. But two things that you said struck me as perhaps contradictory. I mean, what you were just talking about is, incredibly punk rock, and I'm here for it. Organized crime, I think people romanticize it too much, but like prohibition sucked. And if you're getting around it, I think that's kind of rad. But you also, and you're not the first person to mention this to us, our Uber driver on the way also mentioned that you were the city with the second most fountains on earth. And there's something so charmingly Midwestern about being like, well, we're not going to claim first place.
Yeah.
Like, no one would buy that. And we don't want to make waves. We'll say we're the second most. That sounds about right. Yeah.
Right.
And that is kind of the thing that's really charmed me about Kansas City is that there are a lot of those. It's kind of on the border of two seemingly contradictory things. Like we were doing a walk through town early and I'm like, I've never really been to a place that sits at this intersection of the Midwest and the South before.
Right.
And that's really fascinating.
And the West.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it seems like there are a lot of different identities that can come together to make this place special, like a bar and a funeral home where you say it out loud and it doesn't sound like it makes sense at first, but then you see it in action. You're like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
Kansas City is the crossroads of America. And you can see it in all the different communities and different ethnicities that are represented here in our world. And we're just the beneficiaries of being able to like gather all that culture up together, and it becomes, one cohesive town, even though there's a state line that runs through the middle of it. And you never can tell if you're in Kansas or in Missouri.
Right.
But it's, it's just a one, kind of really unique kind of metropolitan area. We're just, I was born here, not always raised here, moved back here. My wife, she's lived her life in a 10-mile radius here in Kansas. I'm so thankful that that's the case because that's how we've then lived our life and how our son was raised and things. It's just a tremendous community that people don't really think that much about, but it's it's an awesome community.
We are all shucksy about being number 2 in fountains. We are not all shucksy about being number 1 in barbecue, though.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we really only worship 2 gods here, and that's Patrick Mahomes and barbecue. That there is church is really taking a hit on Sunday between Arrowhead and our favorite barbecue restaurants. So
which, as you were telling me earlier, is in a gas station. So that's another like hybridization that you wouldn't expect.
Working funeral home,
There's so much
Speakeasy.
good barbecue all over this town. Though. It's great, and we can argue with Memphis and the Carolinas, and
sure,
whoever else.
It's cute.
It's different, but there's so much good barbecue all over this town.
I have been really struck by the amount of just very genuine pride there is in Kansas City since I've been here. I mean, like I talk shit on New York all the time, but in a way that's like, you're not allowed to say that about my mother. I can say that about my mother,
right.
You know? Not my actual mother. Audrey's a saint,
no.
but
if you're watching Audrey.
Yes. My Bob might be. I don't know about Audrey. But the thing that I have been really moved by is the fact that there seems to be a lot of people that I've talked to who are like, I grew up here, I moved away for a few years, and then I moved back. I love it, and it seems like a really healthy and just genuinely appreciative community of people that live here in Kansas City.
Yeah, Kansas City is made up of rural people that moved to the city. So we're made up of all the people that came from agricultural small towns and came to the city. And so we've lived with this enormous chip on our shoulder about St. Louis. St. Louis lives with this enormous chip on its shoulder that it's not Chicago. Chicago lives on this enormous chip on its shoulder that it's not New York. And somehow we started to become a little bit more like Dallas, a little bit more like Denver. And then all of a sudden we just became our own thing. And the fact that we're in the heartland and we just kind of own this kind of uniqueness that we're in the middle of it all. And we just had the convergence of a bunch of stuff happen at the same time. Incredible companies coming in, bringing young, smart people, some cool crossing of development and sports teams doing well at the same time. And then kind of a rediscovery of stuff that we already loved, which is like the history of Kansas City, barbecue, the redevelopment. We have our Union Station is the second largest train station in America behind Grand Central Station.
Second largest.
Second largest.
Avis. Remember the Avis commercial?
Yeah.
We're Avis. We try harder.
Yeah. And the great history behind it is that it was the FedEx for World War I. All the soldiers came into Kansas City, went from a train outway. So the only monument outside of Washington, D.C. to any war is in Kansas City. The World War I monument is in Kansas City because everybody came through our Union Station. So that area, the crossroads and the art district that became where we have the chef-owned restaurants and the great cocktail programs led by individuals that had a passion for building cocktails. It all kind of converged literally within like a 3 or 4 year span. And I don't think it's never going to go away. We've created an identity that people from Dallas and Denver and Omaha and Des Moines and St. Louis, they come here and they go, I remember when this was a nothing town. Now you've just blown us away.
Well, it seems like a place that is constantly sort of like reinventing and rebirthing and resurrecting. Speaking of which, there's nobody in there, right?
I can't remember. What is it today? Wednesday?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. No.
Okay. All right.
Today.
Good. Yeah.
So we got lucky.
Yeah. That would be, well, I mean, it seems like a good way to cut down on costs. You don't even have to wipe the bar top down at the end of the day. Like,
right.
We'll get another one in tomorrow. It'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where Gilbert's Ghost really is.
Gilbert's Ghost. Right.
Yeah. Tell me about that. I had a cocktail called Gilbert's Ghost earlier. What was that?
That's the former owner of the funeral home that Andrew brought it from. And, we just that's just our way of honoring, him. He was the one that started this little, bar, speakeasy, whatever you want to call it, in the basement of a funeral home concept. So we do it's basically a smoked old fashioned, and the smoke that comes out of the urn smoker is essentially Gilbert's Ghost, is what we tell people.
As it rises up.
Yeah.
I love it. And I want to put a fine point on something that you mentioned earlier. You said something about helping out and honoring veterans,
right,
and how a lot of, or is it a lot of, or is it all of the profits
100%.
Okay.
We keep zero from all of our events.
Yeah,
100%
they're all
goes.
ticketed, but the charity handles all of the ticketing and all of the funds and so forth. So our primary, if you'll let me talk about it, their primary
Please.
benefactor is Veterans Community Project in Kansas City. It was started by a group of veterans,
Combat veterans.
yeah. Who they wanted to do something about helping veterans as they come back and reintegrate into real life. And they found out that there's a high proportion of veterans that are actually homeless. And one of the main reasons why veterans become homeless is because it's so doggone hard to access their benefits in the VA system. And so their idea was, we're going to build a community of small, tiny homes. The kind of tiny homes that we see, probably, 1/3 of the size of what this place is.
Sure.
It's going to have a kitchen. It's going to be oriented in a way that a combat veteran who's probably experiencing PTSD is comfortable, living in, and we're going to bring them in. So they have a community of 45 tiny homes now in South Kansas City, and the veteran, they go find these people on the streets. And there's been stories, they'll come in and they work with a social worker then, and they will uncover. Some veterans have had as much as $250,000 of VA benefits they just didn't know how to get to.
Or an address even to mail it to or apply to.
Right. They didn't have an address because they were homeless, right? And so the social worker really works with them to try to get them to the point to where they can go out on their own. Homeless shelters they do God's work, but it's hard. You see recidivism all the time in a regular homeless shelter. These guys, 85% of the veterans that go through their system within 12 months are on their own with a job to support themselves and a place to live.
Never go back to homelessness.
Most of them come back and help out and work, in that community and things. And now these guys have, so we're drawn to the results orientation of that, right? Now these guys also have communities at Longmont, Colorado, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. There's one beginning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They're really doing something about homelessness in a very specific segment.
And they take zero money from the government and zero money from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So they are completely self-sustained. And so we did a tour with them, and we looked at each other immediately and said, this is our new benefactor of our event. Asked them what their one single largest donor did, and thought we can do that in a year. We can do better. And we've been a part of a couple groups of people. One of them runs a bourbon tasting event that raises about the same in one night that we do in a year, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. But between the couple three that we do, we'll raise about $250,000 as a part of this collective of money that they don't have to go out and get from donors. It's just within our events, and so that's really our passion.
What is Til Death, the Speakeasy's role in the Kansas City cocktail community? Right, we learned from all of these greats that are own bars and taken risk, actually put capital into bars. This is a fun thing that Andrew and we just fund out of our pockets and stuff. And we have great sponsors, that feed us booze as well. But what's our role?
That is a good sponsor.
Yes.
Our role, we're not in any way ever going to compete with those people, but our role is to give people an opportunity, hospitality, deliver great hospitality, give them a place to escape, and raise as much money as we possibly can to help our community out, right? If you think about, I don't know, this is probably romanticized too much, Greg, but if you're a person in life, what are the three things you really want to do in life? If you have children, you want to raise good children, right? You want to
share life with somebody.
You want to have great, meaningful relationships, in your life where you've given more than you've received. And then the third thing is, what have you done for your community at large? And that's what we're really focused on at Til Death. It's how do we provide the best impact to our community as well?
So there was a question that I wanted to ask you guys at the end, and that basically tells me I'm going to already know the answer to this before I ask it. But I was curious if you had any aspirations outside of this, or if you were, no, we've got a good model here. We like what we're doing. We've been able to tie this to being a helpful part of the community.
We're looking at each other because I'm not sure we
dream.
We dream big.
We do dream. We have successful careers and businesses and things of that nature, and right now, but there are some really good people that we've gotten to know in the industry here in Kansas City. Would we work with them, potentially if somebody said, hey, we'd like to use your concept or something like that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We would.
It'd be very cool to see our
has,
concept.
It has drawing power and so forth. But we're not the guys to go execute it, but we certainly would back somebody and work with them if they wanted to do that.
All right, hear me out. A speakeasy in a maternity ward. You bring that's
Till
also
birth?
exactly
Till
yeah
birth? Till
yeah
birth? Easy?
yes. Or I guess you could call it afterbirth, but then that might get a little bit gross. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. We can workshop it, but the point is, you've got another occasion where people are going to want to drink, and then you just bring the whole thing full circle.
For your Arrested Development fans, there's a great quote. The mom's going to see her son in the hospital, and she says she's tired of being in the room with it. She says, I'm going to go to the bar. And Jason Bateman turns to her and says, well, there's not a bar in hospitals. And she said, well, that's the problem with hospitals. And she walks out of the room. So I think that might be the problem. There isn't a bar in hospitals, right?
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Carry on that proud Missouri drinking tradition, right?
Yeah. Right. My side of that, my side of his, the partner's view of that. And that is nothing would be neater to see a charity thing become an every night storytelling, because it's such a great, unique story. And maybe it comes along, but it really, we've worked hard every year in over 8 years to be better at making cocktails, be better at our experience, be better at our theater, continue to improve our space, continue to be more professional. And none of it comes from us. It comes from folks like you and the entire craft cocktail community. They've adopted us. We went to Tales for the first time last year and just had no idea whether or not we belonged. We thought we might hide with the press, or maybe we can sneak in and out. And we realize, gosh, we really are. We are a part of this. And then this sure was our second year. People remembered us. They love the concept. They're like, wow, there is some stickiness to what we do, and we might be a 101, something like that. And so it ego tells you yes, but it's not the ego that would eventually put us there. It'd be some sort of combination of what would the for-profit model be where it still had a charity element to it as well.
But the charity element's really cool, I think. I mean, I just, a guest at one of our recent events pulled me aside. She said, do you know if anybody else is doing this in the United States? And it hit me that, yeah, we may be the unicorn, right? We're doing this to inspire others to do that same kind of thing. And, being on your podcast and telling our story, maybe somebody's going to hear this and say, you know what, we should be doing something. We're cocktail geeks too. And we love hospitality, and maybe we'll come up with our own concept. Maybe it's the maternity ward bar.
Yeah.
And
our tiki guys this year we were at Latitude.
Yeah.
They run the guys that run the tiki convention in central Louisiana, Baton Rouge.
Yep.
They don't have a for-profit bar. They're home bartenders, and they have a full-fledged, full sponsored a full brand tiki event. And they turned to each other and said, we need a charity element to us after hearing our story. So right. it even rubbed off on them, which was really cool.
That's our role, is to just be inspirational and help other people figure out how they can impact their communities.
I love it. Well, Phil, Andrew, thank you so much for having
Greg,
me here.
It's
Thank
our
you for
honor.
coming
We're
on
a big
the show.
fan.
Yeah, we're huge
fans. OG fans.
Likewise, the fandom is mutual, I assure you. When I heard about this, I was like, I got to check that out. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, sharing your thoughts, and thank you for tuning in. That's going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. Be sure to stay tuned. And again, like I said, subscribe. You can know when more of these Boomerang videos are coming out. So be sure to hit those buttons right down there at the bottom of the screen. But until next time, cheers, everybody.
Greg, can we tell them our Instagram?
Oh my God, yes, of course. Yeah, tell them the Instagram.
I'm the marketing guy. I got you.
Yeah.
At Til Death KC, TilDath KC, at Til Death on Insta. It's good stuff.
It is a good Instagram account, actually. Yeah, y'all should definitely follow it. Okay. Now follow them, then hit like and subscribe and do all that stuff.
You should.
And now, until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove.